gov/reach.
Not all of them have green lights, since I'm working on that.
Okay.
I'm gonna give you some instructions.
Oh. I don't follow. Test.
Elise, I did not know your husband was Lincoln until this.
Okay.
The secretary extraordinaire.
Okay, it's
All me, right?
It's 5
Give me all
p.m.
the credit, hopefully.
It's 5 p.m. We'll call the Village Board of Oregon to order on Monday, June 5th, 2023. Start with roll call.
Belo,
Here.
Kirchdorfer,
Here.
Mankey,
Here.
McDaniel, here. Peterson, here. Van Kampen,
Here.
and Beschen, Trustee Beschen is absent this evening. And I just want to encourage you all to talk very closely into your mic.
I'd like to take a moment to welcome our two newest board members, Tom Kirchhofer and Lynn McDaniel. Welcome. Item 3, approval of May 22nd, 2023 Village Board meeting minutes if correct, or corrections and mistakes. Jason?
I move approval.
And Derek? Discussion. Hearing none. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item 4, public appearances, comments, and communications. Items for discussion and/or possible action. 4A, presentation of sale results for $7.730,000 general obligation corporate purpose bonds, Series 2023A from Village Financial Advisor, Ellers.
I was just going to say one quick message. So we're working with the folks on the microphones, but definitely speak just a few inches away from, and then you should be able to hear yourself in the overhead above, just to be able to make sure it's clear. So this is we tweak this. Huh?
Over the large barn fan.
You're right.
Yes. Thanks, Jeff.
There we go.
And Dave Ferris is here from Ellers to fill us in.
That's much better.
I appreciate the chance to come and actually experience your new village hall. We were around for helping you finance this, and it's nice to actually get a chance to see. Can you hear me good? I was going to say what Jeff, when you were telling him about the microphone, you were talking away from it. So
That's,
So
do
thought
as
that
I
was a
say,
little
not
amusing.
as I do.
Yes. So there should be a report in your packet for the sale day report. As you know, we actually sold this on May 11th, I believe. So we're actually giving you a report. We typically, when we sell on a parameters basis, which means that you gave staff of the ability to approve the sale on the day of the sale, we don't typically do a sale day report, but I think because you have quite a few new faces that staff thought it was good for us to kind of go through what the actual results of the sale were. So when we went into the market, we actually had an issue of $7,125,000, and as you can tell, what's before you today and what got approved on sale day is $7,030,000. The reason that happens is because not only do we have reduced issuance costs on the day of sale, but the underwriter gave us what they call a premium, and so most of the some of the premium goes towards their fee, the fee that they keep for compensation for actually doing the deal. So in essence, basically, we ended up able to downsize the issue by $95,000, and I'll show you that better on a schedule that's in here. On the first page of which is up on the board, the purpose of this issue was basically to fund your 2023 capital improvement plans, and it had quite a few things in it, quite a bit to do with the streets, some fire. There was the last part of the library and a few other things in there. Staff can share a detailed list with you if you haven't seen that at this point. We did go through a rating call with Moody's Investor Service, and staff was able to relay to the Moody's analysts what was going on in the village as far as development, was able to show what a strong financial condition the village was in. And so I'll just try and take you back to page 11. I won't go into too much detail, but just kind of point out some of the things they said about you. So page 11 would be the first page. I suppose Jeff's the one that turns the page. I looked over.
Page 11.
Page 11 of my report, yeah. Should be the Moody's page.
And
There you go. Go back up.
page 11.
There you go. So a couple of things on the front page under credit strengths, it says above average economic indicators, and really that's actually something that the village can't actually do anything about. It has a lot to do with your proximity to Madison, but also some of the things you have going on as far as development. And you've had strong economic growth, so you're able to, because of the housing and some of the development, that they're actually pretty impressed with that. You have strong reserves and liquidity, which in a governmental entity, that's really tied together. They're really kind of the same thing. Otherwise, it's utilities that also helps us look strong as well. So they're very impressed with your liquidity, and really that's important because that gives you the ability to react to emergencies or one-time things that might hit you. So having liquidity is really a good thing. Let's see. So under ways that we can upgrade, I think you're a pretty solid AA2 is your rating right now. I would say that you'd have to grow quite a bit. You'd have to be a lot bigger to probably jump up to a AA1. Fitchburg is trying to get there. I don't know that they've actually got that point. Actually, I think they may be actually trying to get to a AAA, which they're a fairly decent-sized community. And some of their reserves and things are even bigger than their policy. So we have a policy manual that you're probably going to take a kick at one of these days here, and you have a minimum amount of fund balance policy. But really, the communities that are actually getting rated bigger are actually have more than that minimum. They actually have bigger fund balances or liquidity. So. Let's see, that's there's some other things in here that you can look at. There's a little more detail under the financial operations where it talks a little bit more about liquidity. And back on page 16 is kind of the scorecard that Moody's uses that kind of shows you that, the scorecard they show you that comes out to a AA2, and that's what you were assigned. So you are, in their eyes, the size of your community, you're rated really well. So congratulations on that. Back to page 1 then, Jeff? Yep. There you go. Come back.
This or the,
There you
this
go.
one?
There you go. We had 8 bidders, so typically we want a minimum of 3. So there was quite a bit of interest in your your issue, and the interest rate bid was anywhere between 3.52 and 3.79%. You know, the low bidder was the Baker Group out of Oklahoma City, and you know, basically the difference between the cost of this is about a $200,000 difference between that low and that high bid. So really, what you're seeing is competition really helps some of these people. If they want to buy your bonds, they're going to sharpen their pencils, and so they did that for you. A little farther down the page, it has a little bit of a schedule that talks about what the amount of the issue was. It was, like I said, it was downsized from the pre-sale report that we did here by $95,000. Other important things, some of these numbers I'll talk about on a schedule. Other important numbers is the bonds that mature starting in 2033 can be called in 2032, which means when we get to 2032, if it makes sense for us to refund these, like the interest rates came down like they did 2 years ago, or you have some cash available that you could throw towards these, if it makes sense, we can do something to refund those issues or a part of those issues. Moving on a little bit further, as I talked about, page 3 and 4 has the bidders that you had, with the Baker Group being the low bidder. Going on to page 5 is where you can see the issuance costs were about $12,000 lower, but that $81,000 that says underwriter fees, that's covered by that negative $446,000. So $81,000 comes out of that first. And then that $364,000 amount that you see, that gets put away into an account that has to be used towards next year's interest payment. So the village now has $364,000 that's going to be, well, I think you're closing this week. So this week we'll have in the bank that $364,000 that Lisa will apply towards next March's payment. Otherwise, like you can see the difference between the size of the issue. And I'll show that a little bit better on the next page, Jeff, which is a wide schedule, but there's a little bit on the bottom there. So as you can see, where it went down by $95,000. The interest rates actually ended up being about $17,000 less than what we showed you when we were here a month ago. The premium that is available to make that first interest payment is there, and so based on the pre-sale report comparison, you had about a $477,000 better outcome than we showed you at the pre-sale report. What we did, though, is when they throw that big premium, as you can tell in the pink section where we show the repayment schedule, that really kind of knocks out that full interest payment. And through the financial management plan process, we kind of came up with what we thought it would take to fund your projects that you have for the next 5 years. So we actually, when we showed you this a month ago, we were aiming at that $3.5 million. Because of that big number that hit there, what we were able to do is push a lot of principal up to the top to keep that $3.5 million number intact, so that we're still on track with what we showed you in the financial management plan. But what it does is it actually gets that out of your outstanding balance sooner, and so we're not really, we're not making as much interest payment because we pushed some of that up as well. So that's another positive. The next 2 pages are just how we broke out the issue with the purposes, because bonds have certain purposes that you have to show. So you can see that we've broken them out not only by the purposes, but by the number of years that we're amortizing them over. So that's how that issue broke out. And actually, it's more than 2 pages. It's 3 pages, with the total of the whole issue being on that last page, which should match that pink section that you saw before. On page 10 is the debt capacity calculation. For anybody that's first time, the blue line is, the top of the blue line is 5% of your equalized value. That's the statutory amount that the village can borrow in total. And that number, I don't have it in numbers, but you can see it's somewhere about $80 million, I believe, because it's in thousands. And so that blue section that's available is really what the village, based on the policy that you're going to have a kick at in the, fairly soon, that's a section that the village is holding as a possible emergency money. So we don't want to tie up all of our money in debt. If we need to have it for something that might come out of the blue, some kind of a, maybe some kind of a emergency where we need to fund it quickly and won't have a chance to get to some kind of funding, at that point you have that available. Then the red is really the policy that you're going to consider when staff brings that forward. So that's at 75% of the statutory amount. And then the green line really is where you are at the end of 2023. You'll be at 48.34%. So you have quite a bit of capacity to do your projects. The other thing, I think, if I recall, I think this is the version that does not have the full 5-year plan. This is just the 1-year borrowing. So that drops off fairly quick, but once you see our 5-year plan or 10-year plan that you guys do, that you'll see that line pretty much smooth out right around that 40-some% when we get that done. After the credit report, we kind of put in an interest rate graph, which, when I sent this out, that was a few weeks ago. So, really all that's happened is it's bumped up a little bit because people were scared about the debt ceiling, and the interest rates have actually, since they came through with that they were going to get it done, interest rates actually dropped about 10 points this last week. So if you looked at this graph, there actually is a little bit of a jump, and then it comes back down, and from what I've heard, rates are expected to go down starting around September. So hopefully that's true. So that's the sale day report. I'm happy to answer any questions or clarify anything that's in here.
Anyone? Quick clarification, Dave.
Sure.
On the Moody's credit opinion, page 11, page 18 of our packet, ratings outlook. Moody's does not typically assign outlooks to local government issues with this amount of debt. Is that in terms of because our debt's too low or too high, or?
Well, what it really is they don't typically give you a positive outlook or a negative outlook when it comes to a government. I have seen a negative outlook on one of my clients, which was one that we're basically saying if something doesn't happen, we're definitely going to have to consider downgrading you. I don't see that happen very often.
Okay, so this isn't a cautionary note then?
Yeah.
Of any kind? Okay,
You don't have that issue.
All right, thank you. Okay, this item was for information only. So, any other comments or questions? Amanda?
Yeah, thank you to Lisa, who keeps an eye on these things, and the excellent management of our village staff. This is a good thing. We saved a lot of money, so thanks.
Yeah. Okay, moving on. Item 4B, presentation on financial feasibility of a request for tax incremental financing from North Point Development regarding a mixed-use development located at 831-871 Oregon Center Drive, in process for potential creation of tax incremental district number 6. Staff recommendation. Now, I wanted to point out, I talked to Elise quickly before the meeting on page 39 of our packet. Appears to be a typo. Under the recommendation, it reads the last sentence. We conclude approving a resolution of financial support in the amount of $680,000 is warranted for this project, but the correct amount is $1.5 million.
Right, and I'm seeing that on page 47 of my packet, so.
47, okay.
So Dave, I think we were gonna start out with your presentation and then give Keith the call.
He's not on the line yet.
He was supposed to be the one giving the presentation on this.
Okay,
Then I'm
we'll
gonna-
start with his. Okay, you got his number. So Keith is another works with Ellers and reviews our TIF requests, has reviewed our last couple. He's up in Minnesota, so we're gonna give him a call.
Yeah, so Keith is somebody that does quite a few of these. He does about 50 pro forma reviews between Wisconsin and Minnesota. He's worked on a lot of my clients lately, and he's really.
This is Keith Bell of Ellers.
Okay.
Hi, Keith. This is Candy calling from the Village of Oregon. So we're up to the item that we need you to present on.
Perfect. Sounds good. Do I have the floor?
You do.
You've got the floor.
We can hear you.
Good evening, President and Trustees. Before you tonight is an application from North Point Development requesting financial assistance. And as your municipal advisor, Ellers conducted a pro forma analysis of that financial assistance request to determine if it was warranted, and if not, how much is supportable. So through the pro forma analysis, we look at the development budget and we look at the pro forma of the proposed development. We're specifically looking at construction pricing, land acquisition, financing fees, professional fees, developer fees, and such, to ensure that they are generally in line with what we're seeing on industry standards. And so how we define general industry standards is similar type projects within the last year, and we're looking at cost comparison within Minnesota and Wisconsin. In addition, we also took a look at the pro forma, specifically the rents and the operating expenses, just to see, one, are they maximizing the rents based on Section 42 specifically for a tax credit project? The rents are released annually by HUD in April, or I should say specifically the incomes, and you calculate what the gross rents are going to be. Ultimately, we want to ensure that those are maximized to ultimately maximize the private investment on the sources and uses. We're also taking a look at the operating expenses, see how they compare with what we're seeing on other projects, and working with the village's assessor to determine what an estimated market value of this project might be at stabilization, so that we can project out and have some idea of what level of tax increment is going to be generated from this project over the duration of the TID. So from there, we ultimately want to maximize the private financing, the private investment, before we look at providing public dollars to a project. And this is essentially the gap on the sources and uses. So through this process, we determined that the amount that was initially being requested by North Point Development was more than what was necessary for the project to move forward. Through the pro forma analysis, we ultimately concluded that tax increment financing assistance in the principal amount of $1.5 million is supported for this project. This is a principal amount, so it does have an interest component to it as well. And the interest rate would be the lesser of stated or actual. And so the developer stated 6%, but we tie that ultimately to whatever the interest rate is on the first mortgage, because we don't want the village to pay more interest than what's commercially available within the market, even if interest rates currently may be around 6.5%. It's what we conducted the analysis and benchmarked that public amount on, so that's why we use the lesser of stated or actual. Now, as far as what and how this is going to be repaid, this is not upfront funds that the village is giving to the developer. It's a municipal revenue obligation note, obligating the village to pay 85% of the annually available tax increment that is specifically generated by this development. And our current numbers anticipate that this $1.5 million principal amount would be repaid over an anticipated 20-year term. Depending upon what happens with inflation, interest rates, and so forth, and stop at 20 years.
Can you repeat that last part,
The
Keith?
last.
You kind of broke up a little bit. Can you
Yep.
repeat the last part?
What part did you miss? Yep.
Yeah.
What part did you miss? Just the.
Just the
Where did you lose me?
the last like 10 seconds. So if you can start at.
The last 10 seconds. Okay. So I
I think you were just
clear
laying out the
that
terms, yeah.
the TIF assistance that we're talking about is not upfront assistance. It's future revenue, future tax increment generated from the project that is what the village is ultimately obligating. And it's 85% of that over an anticipated term of 20 years. So essentially, the developer would take this municipal revenue obligation note and go to a lender to secure the upfront capital for construction of the project. And then the final thing that I wanted to mention was that the developer will be receiving 85% of annually generated, so that leaves 15% available to the village. And the anticipated amount over 20 years that the village has for administration expenses and other ongoing capital costs potentially that could be supported by the TID is about $500,000. So with that, I can turn it back over to the president or any trustees for questions that they may have of the analysis.
Discussion, questions?
I probably should have led with this, but do you all understand where this project is and kind of generally what's being proposed?
Across the street.
Across the street, right north of Mulligan's and the new Journey Above daycare, so in Oregon Parks neighborhood.
Well, Phil, I got to say that I'm excited about this project, and it looks like a great project for the long-term tax base of the village. I like that it's building up. It's great for sustainability, great for village resources, as in we're able to service more people in it because they live in a more dense situation, and I love the affordable housing part of this project. So based on the presentation and what I've read, I think this is fantastic.
Amanda?
Yeah, I had a question. How much does it cost generally to create a TID 6 to have them be able to get this financing? Does anybody?
That's in the packet, isn't it?
Yep, we can, so there's kind of two processes that we're requesting to start tonight. One is kind of wrapping up the TIF agreement with the terms that Keith laid out, and then Dave provided a memo for their actual work on creating the TID, which that would be covered by the developer, but that will happen kind of through the summer, early fall.
So I don't know where this is in your pack. Is this in your packet?
It is, let me get that
Because
page
we could
number for
jump to that
Jeff.
quick. It's
Yeah.
related.
We were just gonna do the analysis first, and then.
Oh, okay.
Okay.
Okay,
So I didn't know that we could approve the TIF without having a district for it. You know
well,
what I mean?
yeah, we won't be
That's why
approving
I
the
was
TIF agreement tonight. You all would just authorize us to proceed to work with our legal team to actually get that drafted.
Okay, thank you for
So,
that.
we're getting there.
Okay, sorry.
You want to take that piece then, just proceeding with the TIF agreement, and then we can address the TID creation.
Okay, well, what I see here is a motion to authorize proceeding with the creation process of tax incremental District 6 and draft development agreement with North Point Development. That the motion that you want to get consider? Amanda?
Yeah, I'll make that motion.
All right, Derek, second?
I'll make the motion.
Derek? Discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Now, there's an element?
Well, so you just approved both pieces, which is fine, but we can still have Dave provide some information on what that process will look like. But was included in the packet. Did you get to it yet, Jeff?
Under,
What I read was exactly what's in the
Yep.
agenda.
No, you're fine.
Okay.
yeah,
So let's talk about the TIF. Do we need Keith anymore for this?
I don't think so.
That's the point that we wanted to.
Yep.
Okay.
Keith, I think we're good. Nobody has any further
Yep.
questions.
Perfect, sounds good.
Okay,
Have a great
thanks.
evening.
Yeah, bye-bye.
thanks.
Okay, page 118 of the packet, I found it. So Dave will kind of just walk us through, we haven't created a new TIF district in a while, so this will just be for the two parcels, which will be combined into one for the North Point project. But just walk us through kind of the schedule and
Sure.
the meetings and things like that.
Sure. We also provided a TIF 101 for reference purposes. If for some reason there's anything that you want to ask me specifically, I'm not going to do the full presentation because it's 50 minutes, and I feel like your time's probably more valuable than that. Some of your board members had to listen to me for about hour and 15 minutes on Friday, so I think they probably heard enough of me. So what I would like to go through is, we have a contract in front of you, but in that contract, it kind of tells you what we're going to do as part of that contract, and that starts, why don't you go about, it's page 3 of my, or actually, there's another page one. It says Appendix B at the top, John.
I think page 121 of the packet.
Here we go.
So that'll talk about the scope of services. So the feasibility analysis, typically, when you have a pro forma analysis that's performed by us, we discount that first part. So typically, that first phase that is there is, the pricing is on actually a few pages later, but usually it's about $6,500. We discount that $3,000 for the work that Keith did for you. There's still some things that we have to do through that process that Keith doesn't take care of, but a lot of that information as far as the development assumptions and the payment schedules are pretty much ready to go. So that part will be good. We have to set up the rest of the things, so you can see in there, we'll obviously we have to get all the equalized values. We'll have to make sure that we've got the newly platted test, which if you're new to the world of TIF, when you create a mixed-use district, is that what it is?
Yeah, there's commercial
I was going to say,
in the
okay.
building. Yep.
Before I start talking about it, when you create a mixed-use district, you cannot have any more than 35% of newly platted. But I think that we decided that, or Matt looked into it and was able to determine that this was really existing platted, so we don't have to worry about that rule. So there's a few things that we've kind of vetted through the process, so that's not quite as big of a deal on this, but we do go through that feasibility, put the schedules together that go into the project plan, and so there's still a little bit of work that we have to do through that first feasibility part. But that phase 1 is that part of the process. When we get to phase 2 is when we start doing the project plan, which is a document that is probably, let's go with about 30 pages long. It's got information about what the district's about, then it's got a bunch of things that are required by the statutes that have to be in there. You'll see things that'll talk about whether there's newly platted or whether that even applies. There'll be things about what the project costs are, how we're going to fund them. Based on that last item, you saw that there's like a development assumption with a cash flow. Those will all be in there. There's other things that are required by statute, but that's that phase of things. Then we'll actually, I think this also includes all the meetings. So what we also do is, and we have a staff person, basically does a lot of the putting together the notices. Staff has a chance to review, probably does the actual sending it to the paper, although Paula might do that as well. But also she sets up basically the joint review board meeting, which is a group of the people that are the overlying taxing districts. So it's the county has a member, the school has a member, the technical college has a member, the village has a staff member, whether it's a board member or a staff, that's up to you. And then there's usually an appointed community member that you have on your committee on that committee as well. So it's somebody that you appoint, and I don't know, is that a person that has been around that you may recommend again?
Mark Belo, yeah, I think we're gonna drag him back in.
Okay, so you've had that person in place for the past joint view meetings, and so that same night, typically, we have the planning commission do a public hearing. So there'll be some notices ahead of that so that we have the proper 15 days or whatnot, so we can have a public hearing. Then there's a certain amount of time in between, and it comes to you, the village board. The actual night that you approve it is actually the approved night. That'll go down in the state's numbers as far as the date that you created it. However, the joint review board has one more kick at the can at it. They have to actually sign off on a few things, one being that without TIF, that this couldn't be created. I believe that what you can hang your hat on already is that Keith just gave you a report that showed you that this can't go forward without assistance, and that is a but-for test. So you've already checked that box. You've already created that but-for. And, you know, there's a couple things in there that they have to be, realize that they're a partner in this, and that they're, you know, they're signing off that they're partnering with you to have this development occur. So that's kind of what they have to evaluate. I feel like what you just saw and approved gives them pretty much that confidence to approve this. So I can't see why this district wouldn't fly through with the Joint Review Board. Once we get done with that meeting, then that kind of is where phase 3 kicks in. We're going to try to create this before 9:30, I believe, is what we were shooting for, because if you create the district before September 30th, then we can use the 1/1/23 values. And that's important because if they put a shovel in the ground this year, we may not be able to capture some of those numbers in that pro forma. So we're going to want to have a 1/1/23 district. And then what happens at that point is we have until the end of October to get information into the state so that it's all set up. There might be a little bit of back and forth, but it's easy for the staff to check off what else they need if we haven't already got it done. So that's kind of the gist of how we create a district. You'll see us back here probably August-ish. I don't know that we've actually nailed the calendar down, but I think we have a preliminary out there. Is there anything else you wanted me to talk about? Just to answer, Trustee Peterson, just to answer your cost question, Jeff, do you want to go down a few more pages?
Mm-hmm.
Right there.
So as you can see, there's a paragraph underneath that chart that says that we've discounted phase 1 by 3,000. Phase 2 obviously has all the meetings and such, so there's about $8,000 worth of work there. And then phase 2 is really just that submittal to the state for $2,500, so a total of $14,000.
And so the client is paying you directly. We're not involved in that.
No, we bill the village, but the village collects an escrow
I gotcha.
or something to that effect so that they pay for it. The developer does.
It's a lot of moving
Yeah.
dollar signs, yeah.
But it'd be a fee reimbursement.
Yeah, and then as far as this is kind of back to the project plan, but we'll kind of lay out in the project plan some of those public infrastructure projects that will use the 15% increment to retain by the village, and then that can fund intersection improvements or road repaving, utility improvements in that area, which is nice. Definitely, we've seen a lot more development on that side of town, and then also those roads are aging amazingly. That's already been 20 plus years that neighborhood's been in place.
And thank you for your explanation, like that you sort of needed a TIF funding request in order to prompt
Right,
the
we
creation
wouldn't
of a
otherwise
TIF.
be creating a TID out here if not for a project that needs TIF.
Yeah, the risk of creating a district before you have development is, you could use up some years that you would not have development. So the way you're going about it is actually you're getting the best of everything. And the method that you're paying the developer is the least risky for the village. Pay as you go or municipal revenue obligations, which are interchangeable words, are really the way that the village keeps itself from like borrowing money and paying for things up front, and that's basically the best that you can get as far as risk for the village.
Other questions, comments? I just want to echo Jason's comments that I think this is good for the village on all the levels he mentioned, and I think it's going to be a good thing. It appears that we've passed any motion that needs to be covered.
Yes,
Okay, great.
preemptively, but we're all good.
I'm still learning. Okay, is this you again, Dave? 4C, presentation of streetlight and electric expenditure recovery, user charge study from the village financial advisor Ellers, and draft information ordinance.
So
This is Dave.
I don't know if you realize it, but what the staff called this is Dave Fest tonight. Yeah, they thought they could line me up and have me do everything at once, which actually I do appreciate because it's one night and doing everything. So Some of you may not have been around for last year when we did the 10-year financial management plan, but as we went through the process, it was obvious that levy limits is going to be a nemesis for us. As you may have heard, the state is considering increasing state shared revenues, so hopefully that'll give us a little bit of a break before we end up having to show doom and gloom in the future. But unless they fix the formula for levy limits, probably it's going to catch up to us again, especially if we can't get inflation down in this last year. Obviously, it was a killer because, how do you have, I don't remember what the net new construction was, but it sure wasn't 8%, right?
Or the percentage, like 8, something like that.
Was it 8? Well, yeah. So I mean, it's hard for, unless you always have 8% development, if that's what it really was last year, and you can keep up with inflation, that's great. But in most cases, your net new construction, which is your new buildings less any demolition, isn't going to keep up with that kind of a rate. So really the biggest problem is that the state came up with a program called expenditure restraint, which last year you could have increases in expenditures of 8% and get an extra payment in shared revenue. But in most cases in municipalities, you couldn't actually fund that. So it's hard to have, being a good steward of an expenditure program by the state programs guidelines and not be able to fund it. So that's something that the League of Wisconsin Municipalities kind of said, we're going to go after that first revenue sharing thing. We don't want to go after both because we're worried we'll lose both. So I think we have some pretty good traction with getting that additional shared revenue. And I think after that's in place and they've got all the approvals and they're sure they're safe, they're going to start to go after the levy limit. So we'll see how that goes. So a long way around here, we actually, one of the things that you did because of the financial management plan and the levy limits looking like they will eventually come and bite us, is we were looking for alternative revenues. And so I know that Martin has presented some of these, including the street light and maybe the wheel tax. This is actually the report that kind of gives you the chance to approve what's called the street light user charge. The premise behind that is that there is an electric bill that the general fund pays to keep the lights on the streets. And so a revenue that has been vetted through, in Wisconsin, it was Rice Lake. They've had this in place for quite a while. They use a different methodology because they're an economic development area because there's not a lot around it. So their methodology is a little different than yours because they wanted to capture some of the money from people that are coming from out of town to use their shops and things like that. So they have a fee that actually says there's residential, and then if you're not residential, then we're going to charge you on your footage of your front of your business. So the village reviewed that. We're not in the same kind of a economic area as a Rice Lake, and so the other version of actually approving a rate is that you determine what is a residential unit and what is a non-residential unit. And so in this report, you'll see that the village picked that, or village staff picked that one unit is that residential, and that includes everything from a single-family residence up to a threeplex, and then anything that's a fourplex through everything else, whether it's businesses, tax exempts, whatnot, are 2 units. Now, as we go through the report, you'll see that there's some history at the beginning as far as where this came from, that it's been vetted by an attorney that was involved in this. It's actually been, the PSC is caught wind of it, thinking that it was a charge for the electric utility. They found that is not true. It's a user charge to fund a general fund cost. And so, it's something that has not had really any challenges, but has had some legal support for it. So you'll see some history on that in the first couple pages. Of the places that I work on, we've got a couple places that have started to take this up. I'm about to start with the city of Marshfield on a plan, and the village of Marshall. I'm hoping that we'll wrap that one up pretty soon. Prairie du Sac's had a fee for probably a good 10 years, and Sauk City has probably been a good 5 years, and since they're right next to each other, I think that's why Sauk City did it. As far as findings, we're looking for alternative revenues in this environment. There are other communities that have done that, and you'll see that your fee is definitely lower than most of those, or right in the area of what those fees are. We determined that billing unit, as I told you, between residential and non-residential, of what makes that up. Most of the street lighting at this point was on the tax levy, so it was billed through, just to the people that had property that had value on it. It has operating budgets that increased due to inflation. Basically, when we did the analysis, there was some bouncing going on, so we basically tried to come up with what would be a good average amount based on the last year, because there seemed to be some numbers that were moving around, and I think there was more consistency when we looked at the 22 numbers when we were putting this together. So that's how we came up with the number. The one thing that we can't obviously predict for the future is what Alliant will do with its rates, but we're kind of concentrating on where we are now, and I don't think we've got anything that tells us that we have a rate increase coming from Alliant unless staff has heard something about that. So just kind of going through what we recommend is you should be seeing, and is it on the agenda tonight, Candy, the ordinance?
There is a draft ordinance.
Okay. So there's a draft ordinance that you have drafted, that Martin has drafted. We've reviewed through it as well. It's an expenditure recovery charge that helps you pay for that electric bill. You've picked out that billing unit, like I said. We have an analysis, shows you where we came up with the cost. We feel that the utility billing system is probably your best way to build that out. And we feel that this is something that you ought to review annually, probably about budget time, to determine what is the amount that you need to cover that, and you ought to be able to do that with a historical look back at what it's looked like the last 12 months and update that, bring it to the village board to update that fee. As you can tell on page 5, we've got some of the history for you. And then page 6 is really, my page 6 is really where we're looking at that and coming up with where the average we think is as far as the amount that would cost this year. We took that 22 amount and added 3% for inflationary purposes. So that was an additional $3,000 on top of the 105. We did do an exercise where we kind of showed you potentially what the future will be, but like I said, with the staff reviewing this on an annual basis, we're not committing you to approving those future ones because they'll be based on better facts at that time. So if we look at just the 23 amounts, the assessor helped us come up with a number of units that are residential, that's the up to 3-plex, and then the number of units that are non-residential, which are the 4-plexes and everything else. And then we only bill parcels that have value on them, because without any value, they aren't really using the street lights at all. So the vacant land does not get pulled into this. We take that $108,000 that you see up in the green box, and we come up with, well, actually for future purposes, we came up with an amount per fixture, but that was just more of an example. We added some administration for billing, for updating the assessor's numbers for the number of units, as well as the budget time and renewing this fee total. And with that amount of units into the 113,000, we get a monthly charge of $2.30. So that's really kind of the gist of the study and the recommendation that we've brought forward for you to consider if you decide to implement this fee.
Questions, comments? Amanda?
I feel like I'm doing a lot of talking tonight, but I just wanted to, thanks for this report. That's very clear. I just wanted to let people know that Carlene and I did attend the Senate hearing on the shared revenue bill to tell them what we thought. So we're doing everything we can to bring in that additional revenue so that these kinds of things don't happen. It's not ideal, but we have to keep the amenities that we have, and I think we do a pretty good job of saving money where we can, and so I can justify this. I think it's something we should just do this to plug the gap, and hopefully the state legislature will come through with some different formulas for getting us money, because they haven't for the past 20 years.
Derek?
Lisa, when do we find out what we get for shared revenue from the state? At what point in the year do we get those numbers?
It's usually not until, I believe, like October.
That's kind of what I thought. So I'm not necessarily on board with this, just for the mere fact that we had a lengthy discussion about the water utility rate increase coming up, and a lengthy discussion amongst board members on how to mitigate the impacts to the people who can afford it the least. This adds another $2.30 on it, onto something that we're already increasing. We implemented a $40 wheel tax to kind of plug the hole, and I get that we got $57,000 that we need to find within the budget to cover what we said we were going to do for this year. I'm hoping with the mowing plan updates that we're able to recoup some of that money that may have been budgeted for from there. We're nickel and diming people at the moment, and I think this one might just be a bridge too far.
Jason?
Phil, I want to start by thanking the previous board last fall for arm wrestling with all of this. I didn't have the pleasure of being a part of those meetings, and I don't mean pleasure. I'm actually glad I wasn't a part of those quite a bit. I share with what I believe Amanda feels is frustration with the state legislature that's playing politics with shared revenue and putting municipalities in near impossible situations. That being said, I feel like budgeting decisions were made last year counting on these funds, and that while it is unfortunate, $2.30 per month charge is not unreasonable, especially considering what citizens expect. I also know that I do remember what Derek was talking about, because I watched that board meeting about the rate hike on water, and I am thankful that there are programs out there to help citizens who can afford utilities with those utilities, and I'd like to encourage us to continue to point citizens to that and to reach out for help if they need it.
Lynn?
So thank you as well for this report. I have a couple of questions, and I'll just throw them out to the room. As I was looking at this, I share all of these thoughts. I understand some of this. When I think about a budget and coming up with what is going to be a shortfall, I can understand passing something like this. But as a household leader, I think about what happens next year and what happens the next year. And I can see that inflation is gray area out there, but that we're considering it. However, I wonder if we as a board could be working harder to find some more proactive ways to potentially cut some of those costs. Solar power, there's some large tax credits currently that are encouraging specifically private residents, but also municipalities to apply for specific tax credits. Looking at LED, again, I'm not an expert in the current streetlight situation, so please forgive me if I'm speaking in a way that is not as knowledgeable. But I know that is a fairly simple adjustment that I think if we're going to ask residents to add to their utility bill, it might be an easier pill to swallow if we're also proactively trying to at least mitigate what will potentially be a future cost increase. I know that comes with some cost up front, of course, but essentially helping them to understand that we're working hard to try and help either maintain this rate or reduce it in the future if possible.
Okay, thank you, Lynn. Derek?
We'll just say that I do appreciate that one of the saving graces in my mind on this is the fact that it is, like you say, something that can be reviewed annually, and hopefully, like the wheel tax, at some point be disposed of.
I guess guess I would only speak in relationship to a budget was prepared, and not passing this would leave a hole in our budget. We're already halfway through that year. That money, a lot of that money is already spent when you're trying to recover the cost. That's down the road. I would certainly favor relooking at this as part of their budget process and anticipating revenues. But to me, the horse is sort of out of the barn here. We built a budget. We need to make that budget work. We can't put our staff halfway through the year and say, well, okay, now everybody, cut out $60,000 out of your budgets. It would be sort of unfair to them. But I do believe we need to continue, as part of our revenue every year, look at all of our taxing. What can we go, what can we get, where's the revenue coming from? So from that aspect, I would support this particular ordinance and getting that into place.
I would just, Lynn, address your thoughtful remarks. We have a strategic plan in place. We'll be reviewing that later this summer. That would be, and I think everyone would agree, a good time to talk about those things and to indeed implement some of them. So I don't want your comments to just go off into the wind without saying that, I think there's an avenue to address those things.
Phil, over here.
Oh, sorry.
Would you, it'd be okay if I comment on a little bit, just
Yeah.
on some history on some of this? Great ideas, Lynn. I love those ideas, kind of thinking outside the box on where we can go. How our streetlights work is the majority of them are owned or maintained by Alliant Energy. And so the village has basically, in a sense, contracted with Alliant Energy to provide all the streetlights. And those are under a whole bunch of different, they call it tariffs or rate structures. It used to be where one of the rate structures is where you're actually leasing the pole and the light. Another one which, and we did that for a long time, and then now we switched to where we make the developers buy the pole and the light, and we just pay kind of a maintenance fee. But as far as like switching over to LED, that's something Alliant Energy has been doing for the last probably 6 or 7 years. And a lot of them, whenever they switch out the old, are going to LED. Now, the hope would be that they would give us a little credit back for that, but it just changes the tariff a little bit on what that's charged. I would agree that with expenditure restraint, it's forced a lot of municipalities to look at creative ways to generate funds because you're shackled. You're shackled by this point that you can't increase your levy to a certain point. So if you go back even 15 years ago, the big hot topic at that time was a stormwater utility. And excuse me, municipalities enacted stormwater utilities as a way to then assess people in the village certain funds to be able to help manage their stormwater features, dredge ponds, build new stormwater structures and that kind of stuff. And it was a great way to generate revenue just like anything else. Then the legislature came back and closed that door, saying that you can still start a stormwater utility, but whatever money you get out of that has to be taken out of your general fund. So the net was zero, actually negative by the time you formed the stormwater utility. Same thing could likely happen with a streetlight expenditure like this. Once it's enacted, you can keep doing it, but I wouldn't put it past our state legislature to say, okay, you can enact a streetlight a program like this, a streetlight user fee, but you have to deduct it from your levy. And so at that point, it really doesn't make sense. And that's kind of been this tit for tat kind of thing that's been going between the municipalities and state government in kind of opening doors, closing doors, or loopholes and closing the loopholes. And so that's why we've seen it with the stormwater utility. There's actually a utility out there that's a Derek, help me out here maybe, or transportation utility. Thanks, Dave. Transportation utility is another one where all of a sudden now you're starting to charge kind of based off of same type of thing. I don't like it either. I mean, I think it's one of those things that no one here in this room, I believe, likes what's going on. but it has been kind of that point of like, well, how can we effectively continue to grow? How can we effectively, hopefully, spread this out? And it's not an easy answer. I mean, I agree. I see both sides of this very clearly. No one wants to increase rates or fees or anything like that. The water fees, you know, we hadn't increased those in 15 years. So that's kind of falls on us, you know, for not keeping up with inflation. You know, we have to now kind of pay the piper. But for something like this, I see both sides of it. I really do. My only fear would be if this door is closed in the future, and then we're looking at some other way to help fund something like that. But it is about, what was it, about 100? I think we budget around $120,000, $130,000 a year, which is significant, and that continues to go up. That's not tremendously, but I think Candy would remember this. Maybe 3 years ago, Alliant Energy did an audit of all their municipalities and found that the Village of Oregon had been underpaying by about, I think it was $2,000 a month for like the last 8 years. And they came to us and said, you actually have 600 streetlights instead of 500, whatever. And it was, we had to then incorporate that into the budget for the following year, because they did their accounting and found that all out. I think we're really close to where we are now. I think with the numbers we gave you is really, really close to what we have. But I think, you know, we'll continue to see energy costs go up and everything. So it's palatable, but I agree. It's kind of feels like it's just one more thing heaped on.
And just to add on to that, if you look at the schedule on page 6 that I think that's just up at the top there, Jeff.
Yeah. This schedule?
You can see that during '22, the amount that it cost per month went down to about $8,800, and that's what we're using. And so I think Alliant has been giving you breaks based on what they've been doing. So I think you're seeing that's come down, because like Jeff said, it used to be $130,000, but if you track what happened at the end of '22, starting in about March, you know, it's about $8,800 a month. So we're down to $105,000 basically. If we're doing $8,800 a month. So there has been a reduction in that
Yeah.
cost.
And probably because of their switching over to LED
Yeah.
fixtures and everything like that. One question I have for Dave. Am I allowed to ask questions? But the, all right, so, huh? No? Well, no. This is a fixed fee per, you know, and if for some reason there are increases, that extra just comes out of the general fund, I believe, correct?
Yeah, so if the fee isn't enough to cover this, Lisa, were you keeping this in the general fund?
Yes, this will stay
Okay.
in the general fund.
So in some cases, it's in its own fund, and so all of a sudden you have a deficit if you don't have a big enough fee. So the general fund will help support it if the fee isn't enough, and if it's too much, every year you're supposed to review it, so you can adjust that down so that you're not collecting too much.
Yeah.
So that's kind of one of the things about this is it needs to be looked at annually, because if Alliant is continuing to drop your numbers, you don't need as much to fund it.
I just want to touch on something that Derek made some good points about, you know, we're adding on here, and for some people, this is, you know, some difficulty. A while back, Martin detailed how once we switched to a new utility billing system, which I believe we're authorizing tonight, unlike the postcards, these will go out in an envelope, flat sheets, and we can include information for programs for people to apply for grants for individuals that have difficulty with their utility bills. So there'll be, again, you know, it's not a miracle cure, but it is an avenue where we can reach out to some of these people. Jason?
Phil, last thing I'd like to say is I'd really like to encourage residents to, I think I know where our state legislators stand, but also neighboring legislatures to take the strings off shared revenue and just pass it, because it's not right that municipalities are getting choked out and struggling with services when the state has a surplus.
Amanda?
And citizens can contact their legislators.
Yes.
And the people on those committees in particular, not just your legislator, but the Senate committees and Assembly committees, anybody who deals with passing these, let them hear from you, because, you know, what they've done, you know, people talk about running government like a household budget, right? And in a household, you know, yeah, if you don't have the money, you tighten your belt, you don't spend the money, but households have the ability to raise more money too, like going out and getting an additional job on the weekends or something. And the legislature has said, no, you can't go out and get more money. You're very, very limited in the things you can do. And so, you know, it really is very restrictive for municipalities who are growing. We're a growing community, which is a happy problem to have. But yeah, we've just been very limited. So please reach out to your representatives.
Anyone else? Okay, so what we have before us is a draft ordinance, and if we're going to accept that, basically what we're looking for is a motion for village staff to have the village attorney do a final approval of this, and then it would come back to us for a final vote on June 20th, ideally. So it would be a motion to authorize the staff to proceed with the draft ordinance.
I'll move to have the staff come up with a final draft of the ordinance to bring before the village board at our next meeting.
A second?
And second by Tom. Discussion. Hearing none. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? One no. Thank you. Thank you, Dave.
Bye, Dave.
Thanks, Dave. We enjoyed Dave Fest.
Dave Fest.
It's a monthly event. Item 4D, public comment. This part of the agenda allows members of the public to provide information to the village board, including items both on and off the agenda. Board members may discuss procedural matters relating to the information, such as whether the information should be directed to staff, referred to a committee, or placed on a future board agenda. However, board members may not expand their discussion beyond such procedural matters. 15 minutes will be provided for this item, with a 3-minute maximum per speaker. And we have one register.
Just a register.
Not to speak? Not to speak?
No,
Oh,
unless
okay.
they want to ask if they change it.
All right. Anyone for public comments? Please, come on up, sir. Get your name and address for the record, and speak closely, we're finding tonight.
Will do. My name is Andy Shavy.
A little more,
I live at 605 Prairie Grass Road here in
Thank
the village.
okay?
And this would be regards to Agenda 7, the Lavalette Fleming development.
Okay?
Thank you for the opportunity to speak here. It's nice to put faces with names I read about in the Oregon Observer every week, so this has been kind of a nice treat here. Mr. Rao and Ms. Cruz probably recognize my name. I emailed them earlier. I've emailed them in the past. So we live at Lot 24 as identified in the plans that you've probably looked at. We are the first parcel north of the new development. So primary impacts would be adjacent to that development. We are a parcel away from that, so close. We've known since we moved here 8 years ago there would be development there. We have no issues with it. I appreciate and have been following it since it was the 3-story apartment building. We prefer the low profile that it's proposed as now. Very nice. I support the development. My only concern is the vegetation that is along that tree line in our backyard. You've probably heard from my neighbors, so I just want to echo the similar comments. I would request that the board maybe put in some language that we try to save as much of the vegetation as possible. I've seen language about the mature trees. I don't quite know the definition of mature, but you know, we can get through that. It's not a big deal, but just urging that we save the tree line as much as possible. That would be all.
Thank you. Anyone else for public comments? Hearing none, moving on.
Phil steps out. So item 5 on the agenda is approval of vouchers in the amount of $480,980.88. Can I get a motion to get it, so we can talk about it?
So moved.
Yep, so Derek first and
I'll second.
Jason seconds. Okay, any questions for staff or, go ahead, Derek.
Yeah, I just noticed on page 157 and 158, there's backup internet for the police department, public works, village hall, senior center on both pages. Seems to be the same invoice date. That's
What page are you on?
157 and 158. Number 100, 52100 is the first one, and then it's again on page 158.
Yeah, PD backup internet right there.
It's from April 11th.
It'd be from Spectrum.
It was just, I believe it was, it's 2 separate months being paid on one
Okay,
Yeah.
credit card statement.
makes sense. Thank you.
Any other questions? Okay, seeing none, Candy, this roll call vote?
So Kirchdorfer,
Yes.
Belo,
Yes.
thank you, it's not here. Mankey,
Yes.
Peterson,
Yes.
and McDaniel. Yes.
Okay, so that passes. Next is item 6, which is the consent agenda. Wow, one whole item. So this is to confirm village president nomination of Tom Kirchdorfer as village board representative to the Oregon Area Council on Aging, and Lynn McDaniel as village board representative to the Ad hoc Sustainability Committee and Park Board. So can we get a motion? Someone? Okay, Derek motion?
I'll second.
Jason will
And a
second,
theme here.
okay. Any discussion? Okay, Oh, go ahead.
Sorry, the only discussion that I have is I was looking on the paperwork on the website, and Jason, I believe you are the ad hoc sustainability trustee representative, and I will let you keep that official title, and I'm happy to just be a committee member if that is
Well,
necessary, or do we need 2?
let me jump in here. I'm double booked that night with the
Oh.
Oregon EMS and Sustainability Committee, and I haven't figured out how to split in 2 and be in 2 places yet. So,
I will take the reins.
thank you.
Okay. So I guess we just vote then.
Yep.
All right, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
And anyone opposed? All right, passes. And now it's reports of committees. I'll let Phil take the reins back here.
Yep. Yep, go ahead.
Yeah, so we're at 7A, Planning Commission.
I was remiss in, during public comments, and I'd like to fix that now. Rosalind and Walt Tim registered about the mowing of the green space and their opposition of the above matter. Is that correct? Okay.
Phil, I'm sorry, I had a hard time
I didn't
hearing
hear
you.
that, yeah.
Okay, yeah, during public comments, I was remiss in reading this notice. A citizen registered to, she didn't wish to speak, Rosalind and Walt Tim, in regards to the not mowing of the green space, and they indicated their opposition of the above matter.
Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Seven, reports of committees, item for discussion and possible action. 7A, Planning Commission 1, resolution number 23-24, resolution conditionally approving La
Villette.
thank you.
Must be my French
My-
here.
It's my translators over here. La Valette Bergamot Condominium Phase 2 plat. Commissioner staff recommendation, motion to approve as presented. And Elise did have a memo in the packet. Do you have something to add, or?
No, just that, I mean, the two items, 1 and 2 kind of go together. This is the plat approval step for the condo plat, and then the second is the GDP, the zoning flexibilities that have been requested for setbacks and density and things like that. I will just mention, this has been held kind of in the wings for the last couple of weeks as we worked with the developer and their engineers to finalize plans and have our consultants, Rupert Milky, give a final review letter. So that was included in the packet. There was a couple of small labeling and some typo errors, and I did get an updated comment letter just this afternoon from him, and so all his comments have been addressed. They kind of go hand in hand with the condo plat as well as the kind of utility plans. And I think, you know, I saw some emails today from Jeff. There were some comments and questions about there will be a stormwater kind of swale taking a small percentage of the water that can't exit off to the streets down through the edge of Bergamot Park and kind of down into our system. So I think Jeff's addressed most of those questions about trying to preserve the large trees. It'll just be some small brush and things that'll be cleared up to make sure that swale stays clear and that water can flow downhill. But we're happy to answer any questions that you all have or have received from the public. But these are both good to go as far as we're concerned from our review.
Board members, comments, questions? Lynn?
Thank you for all of this. I think just in addressing some of the concerns of the vegetation and trees, I know that obviously some of these things can't be determined now. It's sort of when things get moving and when we know how these things work. So I wonder if we could, rather than, you know, nailing things down right now, but sort of come to an agreement that if there's going to be a large change in that vegetation or tree area, that at least the board is aware or residents would be aware
Yeah,
of a
so-
possible remedy or future, you know, like the tree planting that
Sure.
took place.
Sure. So that, well, there's two things with this site. The first is the swale that is along the, I'll just kind of pull up the plat here, is along this side, which is, this is Augusta Drive. The swale that's on here is along private property, and all of that area will be totally cleared of all vegetation. They have a very narrow spot for a drainage swale that's going to one of their small dry detention ponds. And it's very tight in that area. We've brought it to their attention, but it is a very small area to be able to get the water. It's not a lot of water, but it is keeping it on their property like we have requested of them. And so the individuals that would be in lot 25, 26, and lot 1 of the Legends of Bergamot will see things from, you know, on the other property here. That'll be totally cleared. I just want to be very upfront with that. And that's their land. They have the right, everyone has the land, you know, you have the right to plant on your land, and you have the right to cut down or take down stuff on your land. The main question and concern that I've been working with is down here where we got lot 22, 23, 24, and 25. And I pull it up on my GIS, but for some reason that's not working tonight. So, but our request to them has, from the get-go, they wanted to, there's a small percentage of water that still continues to go there. Right now, a very large percentage of the water goes there, so this is a dramatic improvement. And what we've asked them to do is put it into a swale so that it's not dumping into the back of their yards. That can be a common complaint. And we've asked them to actually, for the reason of protecting, there's a lot of mature oak that are along that stretch, and we've just asked them to pull it, you know, into the park parcel more to avoid those root structures and everything with the oak trees and the tree line along there. So the plan is not to be clear cutting anything up along here. I've walked out there before, and a lot of it is already very clear and open. It's not your standard kind of scrub brush type of stuff. It's really fairly open. But by moving that away from here out into this area, keeps it away from us having to cut, or having them cut right at the base of those trees.
I think, sorry, I was just gonna say page 178 of the packet, Jeff, is their,
Got
like
it.
grading plan, but that kind of shows where that swale is gonna be, how it's a little bit in from the property line into the village-owned park. Page, 178 it's got kind of some more, there you go.
So originally, they were showing this over along here, and now we've had them, I mean, they're gonna be filling a little, in this area, not a lot, just to be able to move that farther away from here. And we have them extend it all the way down to here, and right here is actually our park. And it, whatever will flow through there, honestly, I don't think it'll be much, and only during what I would call a gully washer, but will flow through that park area and out into the street.
Go ahead.
Phil, just as a follow-up, Jeff, because I don't know if I was misinterpreted, and I want to make sure that so I trust the plan. I
Yeah.
think that the plan is great. I guess my concern is that if the plan were to change last minute, because
Oh,
we
yeah.
all know how these things can sometimes do that, like we would just be aware of that
Yeah.
in the case that were to happen.
Our,
But I
our
trust-
engineers will be overseeing the construction. So we have Rupert Milky as our village engineering, the designated village engineer group. They will observe anything that's public construction or construction on public property. So we'll make sure he's well aware of that, because, we don't want to see those trees die either.
Right.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep, good point.
Anyone else? Okay, so we're looking to, motion to approve as presented. Amanda and Lynn. Further discussion. Hearing none, all those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Item 782, ordinance number 23-05, an ordinance changing the zoning classification of property located at parcel number 165/0509-112-4892-1 from Planned Development MR8 to Planned Development TR6. District related to a condominium unit development, application submitted by Fleming Development. Commission and staff recommendation, motion to approve as presented. I think Elise has spoke to this already, so I look for a motion. Amanda, Jason, discussion. Hearing none, all those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item 7A3. And I will be stepping away and abstaining on this item. Amanda will.
So I'm going to use Phil's mic. Dan.
Yeah, that's
So
good.
just, what's that?
Oh, I thought you were.
I'm letting Dan know I'm using Phil's mic, so you can, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so item 7A3, resolution number 2323, initiating an amendment to the Oregon Urban Service Area to include 47.2 acres of property owned by Hofer Living Trust located at 969 Johnson Avenue and 958 County Highway MM. Do I need to read parcel numbers? Okay.
No, it's all in the ordinance.
I think, okay. Thank you. To accommodate proposed residential development. So let's get a motion on the table. Derek, and second, Lynn? Okay, and any questions?
Who's the second?
Lynn? Yep. No questions on this. Do we need an explanation or anything? This is
Just another step in the Autumn Ridge subdivision expansion near Foxborough Golf Course, but we'll need to go to CARPC, the Capital Area Regional Planning Commission, for a request to expand our urban service area, which is the area we're allowed to provide public water and sewer. So there's a whole bunch of plans that go along with that, basically making sure we're not impacting sensitive environmental corridors, creating any further concerns with, our capacity of our wastewater treatment plant, that new development can, be accommodated by our plant. So that application will probably be submitted in early July, along with this resolution saying that we consent to having our urban service area amended for this purpose. So this is areas that are currently in the town of Oregon, town of Rutland, kind of the south end of Foxborough Golf Course, and some farmland that's just south of the golf course on the east side of MM.
Any discussion? Okay, hearing none, all those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, passes. And it's item 7B, you want me to just take it? Okay, because I'm the one that's going to be reporting anyway. It's item 7B, the Ad hoc Public Transportation Committee. Number 1, presentation related to public transportation survey results from Ben Lyman from the Greater Madison Metropolitan Planning Organization at the July 24th, 2023 board meeting. So as chair of the Transportation Committee, we met, and he came and gave us a very in-depth analysis of what our survey showed, and we'd like the village board to hear that before we proceed. It's sort of, I suppose you could sort of treat it as our year-in report because we surveyed the community, and now he'll have some suggestions for the next steps, and we wanted the village board to hear that and buy in, because we might ask to apply for a grant, to get a planning grant and study further. So that was it. It was just more of a report, no action required. And then 8, I'll turn it back to you, Phil.
Excuse the minor disruption. Item 8, unfinished business, items for discussion and/or possible action. A, task order number 2023-04, agreement for professional services with Rupert Milkie for American Land Title Association Survey and Phase 1 Environmental Site Assessment for future senior center facility at a cost not to exceed $12,700. Did you want to speak to this, Elise, or?
I can, I'm working, getting to the,
Oh,
anybody remember which page that is? No, oh, here we go.
241.
241, okay. So as some of you know, we've been working on our next big municipal building project planning with Tri-North as our owner's rep for the new senior center. We've been working on a space needs analysis with their architect to understand what space the senior center has now, what's needed in the future, what are some kind of trends, what's missing in their current building we want to make sure we capture. So there's that process going on. The next sort of process in the planning is site due diligence, so understanding the site, kind of that whole block we have there where the current library, senior center, post office are in those parking lots. What's underground, what do we need to know about, what's kind of the buildability of the site. There's been some work done before, some soil borings, kind of initially. But the 2 steps we want to take to kind of understand again, what are we dealing with underground, as well as if we would end up selling part of that site, what information would a potential buyer want to know before purchasing. So those 2 surveys we'd like to do are an ALTA survey, which is kind of a survey of property points, as well as looking through easements and historical documents, making sure there's not any, we don't have our hands tied with any of the property, mapping utilities, things like that. And then a phase 1 environmental assessment, or called a phase 1 ESA sometimes. The engineers at the table could probably better explain what's going on there, but basically make sure there's not any contamination on the site that would need to be cleaned up prior to construction. So just given it's a very built out site, there's a lot kind of going on there with underground utilities. The costs are just slightly higher than you would see for kind of a typical green field type site, but definitely in line with where we were expecting. So the total cost for both of those studies would be $12,700. We budgeted in the CIP this year $200,000 for the senior center planning work. So some of our work with Tri-North is coming out of that. But we anticipated these studies to be done. So I'm not sure if we get a timeline from Jason, but I imagine these will probably be done in,
This
probably
summer to fall.
yeah. So a couple of months to get this work done.
Okay, so we're looking for a motion to approve it presented or otherwise. Lynn? And Amanda? Discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you. Item 9, new business items for discussion or possible action. Annual alcohol beverage license renewal applications for 2023-2024. Recommendation is motion to approve as presented. Did you?
I don't really have anything to add, except for, I just want to thank Joy Hanson, the deputy clerk. She's been working very hard, making sure and reviewing all these applications from last year, compiling all the results from the police department. I know the police department works really well with each of our establishments, and they actually have liquor liaisons, so we appreciate that. And really, there was nothing that was alarming that came out of any of these checks. So just a yearly approval.
Derek?
I'm going to be abstaining from this item.
Okay. Good for a motion to approve or otherwise. Amanda?
Move to approve.
I'll second.
Jason? Second. Discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries, 1 abstention. Item 9B, mowing of High Meadows Dry Basin, and I think this is Amanda's item.
Yeah, so, thank you, Phil. I had requested to discuss this item again, and awkwardly enough, I'm going to make a motion to table it because I'm still gathering some information. I know Carleen wanted to be here for this item, and she's out of town right now, so I'd like to bring it up again in July, if that's okay. We just won't discuss it tonight.
At which July meeting? Or do you want a June 20th meeting?
No, let's do July. I know there's a lot in July, so maybe the second meeting in July is what I was thinking.
So the July 24th
July
meeting?
24th, yeah.
So you're making a motion for that?
Yes.
I have a motion and a second. Further discussion? There is no discussion. It's a motion on the table, right? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
Right, so you'll see that on your July 24th meeting.
Okay, 9C, cleaning service agreement for Village Hall with ANC Partnership LLC. Motion to approve. Recommendation, motion to approve as presented. I think Candy had a detailed memo.
It was Jeff.
Oh, and Jeff.
Unless you really hate the memo, then it's Candy's.
Sure, Derek didn't have any input on that
Derek,
too?
Derek,
or-
Derek came up with the contract.
Okay, so
We're all going down.
anything to add to the Jeff Candy / memo?
No, it's just an interim plan.
All right, so we're looking for a motion to approve or otherwise. Amanda and Jason, discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. Item
Thank
9D, contract with American Business Technologies for monthly printing and mailing of municipal service bills. Staff recommendation, motion to approve. There was also a detailed memo in the packet from
Lisa.
Lisa. So we're looking for anything to add, Lisa?
Does anybody have any questions about
No.
the reasoning behind the outsourcing? Or we're going to be going away from the card stock, the small cards, and it'll be going to the 8.5 by 11 when we add on the street light charge. So this will give us room to be able to do that. And this will help free up some of Sue's time with the meter changeouts that we're going to be doing over the next number of years. We're changing out 500 meters a year, which she does all the scheduling with each individual resident that has to schedule that change-out meter. So there's a lot of other projects that she'll be able to work on by not having to spend time on
Assembling.
cutting these and printing these and mailing them out, so it's a good thing.
Motion, Derek?
Just one question, any idea, any cost savings for the village on moving to this?
Cost savings, well, it's hard to equate it to a cost savings when Sue's gonna have time to work on other projects. I mean, the 74 cents includes postage, it includes material to send it out. Right now, the postage is about $1,400 a month, so $1,200 for the other supplies that they use, the envelopes, the stock paper and that they'll be using, and then their staff time. So I'm sure that it's very cost effective, actually.
Move to approve.
Motion by Derek, second by Tom.
I would say, when you change your billing process, we have to make sure our communication processes kind of kick into high gear, because people will have been used to that little postcard. And the first time you send a bill on a piece of 8.5 by 11 sheet, it's going to go right by them. They're not going to see it. So we need to just ensure that there's a unusually strong communication effort in relationship to that.
The plan right now is, so on the card stock that goes out, there's room on there to put messages. So we'll be putting that message on there that this is going to be coming in the very near future. You know, please watch for an 8.5 by 11 and a regular number 9 or number 10 envelope and not the postage card. So we will be letting them know on the current mailings that we do on the postcards. So hopefully people see that on there. We've been putting our new address on there, so hopefully people are.
You can be guaranteed they'll miss it.
Yeah. And Tom, if I can add, we can also use other avenues such as Facebook, e-notify. We can get the word out.
I guess I would be more.
Yep.
And yes, put the message on the card. I'm not saying don't do that, but I mean.
Right.
That more push communication to people.
Agreed.
Rather than a passive kind of thing.
Yeah, we'll be using all the avenues that we have available to us, so.
We're still trying to get people to know that we've moved too. So
Right.
this is the PR for that. We have moved locations. We are now at 101 Alpine Parkway. So please change your address accordingly.
Amanda?
Yeah, just to follow up, that's a good point, Tom. Thank you for that. But are the cards going to go into the envelope, or is the whole bill going to look different?
It's going to be an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper in an envelope.
Okay.
The cards are going away.
Cards are going away. Okay,
Yes.
so like, do we know, is there a perforation where people have a
There will be a
stub to return?
perforation on it, yes.
Okay, so similar but different.
They're still going to get a bill. It's going to look way different.
Yeah. It just looks like your Alliant Energy bill.
Right, it'll look like your Alliant Energy bill. It'll have all the information on there. It's going to have, you know, your readings on there, on the back. We haven't decided how many months we're going to do this, but it'll have our tariff on the back and all the breakdown on the costing of how the bill is arrived at.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item 9. Pardon me. 9E, future agenda items. This item gives the board members the opportunity to place items and new business on the future agenda for discussion. The board may, if desired, conduct a vote to propose items to determine whether a majority of members agree the item should be placed on a future agenda. And I'm reading that for the benefit of our new folks. Any future agenda items? Hearing none. Item 10, pardon me. Report of village officers. Assistant Director of Public Works Report, 2023 Recycling Grant Award. And I think this is Lauren.
Thank you, Phil. So this is a very brief memo, just meant to highlight the contributions of one of our staffers that often doesn't come into the limelight and really should more. It's something that Candy, Lisa, and I thought about last week and thought was important. Sue Poole, who Lisa just spoke about, our utility clerk, did submit, as she does every year, for the DNR recycling grant, and as we do pretty much every year, because Sue is wonderful at her job, we did get that grant. So that's almost $34,000 that directly goes to benefit our community and our customers that rely on us for trash and recycling pickup. So it's a huge benefit sustainability-wise to the community as well as for the residents. So this is essentially just informational, just meant to highlight her contributions and kind of lend credence to what Lisa said about how freeing up some of Sue's time is really beneficial to the village because she has more time to work on items like this that really do benefit our residents.
Thank you, Lauren. Board comments? No? You have something? No. I just wonder if anyone comments. No, we need to do, yes, right, sorry. 10B, Village Department Head, Staff, or Consultant comments. Chief?
Go first? It's close enough here. So just, I'm not going to go into depth about the press release that's in here.
A little closer.
A little closer. I won't go into depth too much on the press release that's in your packet, but something that's not in there is the fact that some damage was done to the squad car. It happens sometimes when we arrest people, especially when they're intoxicated or under the influence of a drug. With this particular incident, we were able to, in-house, for the most part, repair the damage. In the last 7 days, we've also had 2 other squads get damaged. And I guess I just wanted to bring to your attention, and maybe you've heard more lights or more sirens in the village lately. Our officers have been getting called to some pretty challenging domestic-related calls. I try not to do press releases on domestics. This one I had to because it was in the middle of the day and the middle of a very busy intersection. I can't tell you how well our officers are doing responding to these domestics where people are armed, where they've seriously injured someone, and coming in calm, de-escalating these situations. They've been able to end them safely. So we will work on the squad damage and get those back up and running, but I just wanted to keep all of you in the loop on some of the things we're seeing right now. And as far as squad damage goes, just to cover that, I don't think it hurts for you guys to know. So I, as chief, I really try to make sure that that burden does not fall on taxpayers. So we don't just simply report it to our insurance company. If we do have proof that a person did cause damage to our squad car or any of our property, we will pursue charges and we will pursue restitution to pay for that. So in one of those 3 instances, we are certainly doing that. It was pretty significant damage. It actually took the squad out of operation, and the back door is questionable on the operation of actually closing it and opening it. So we're working on that. Just want to keep you in the loop. Happy to answer any questions regarding it.
I just want to say, please pass on our thanks to your officers for going into those difficult situations, and glad that officers weren't hurt and that they were able to deal with them in as safest manner as possible for all concerned. It's not fun when a car gets damaged, but it's better than people getting damaged.
Yes, agree. Thank you.
Candy?
And I just have something real quick about next meeting. So I have 2 people that won't be in attendance, so I just want to make sure everybody at this table will be in attendance, besides the 2, yeah.
Or we'll
Everybody's
come looking for you.
planning on being here? Okay.
Yes.
Perfect.
Any other staff comments? No? Okay. Okay, item 10C, Village Board comments. Amanda?
I'll be quick. I had the opportunity to go to a program called Fire Ops 101 that was put on. It's a statewide thing where you get to go play firefighter for a day and learn things. I got to do CPR, and I'll get in the ambulance, wear all the gear, all of it, like tanks, the whole thing, carry a hose upstairs in to put out a simulated fire, the whole shebang. It was very cool, and a whole new appreciation for fire department and EMS workers, and I mean, always appreciated them, but doing it yourself, it's exhausting, and it is a hard job, and the decisions they do every day, it's amazing. So just a quick shout out to our fire and EMS people in the village. I appreciate you all so much.
Anyone else? Okay, yeah, thank you. 10C1, Village President appointment of Todd Kirchdorfer to the Public Works Committee and as Chair of Finance and Personnel Committee.
Yep.
Oh, yes, all right.
It's just,
Yeah.
yep.
This
you
is
have
for
the
information only,
Yeah.
these are my appointments. But I will mention that I first asked Tom to be on the Finance Committee, and then I recalled that I told Amanda that she would be the temporary chair, because she's kind of loaded up. So then I had to call back Tom and say, oh, and by the way, will you be the chair? Which he graciously accepted, so I just want to acknowledge that. Okay, announcements 11, announcements and miscellaneous business, proclamation for Public Works Appreciation Week. And I know that Lauren probably wants to speak on this. But Amanda and I are going to read through the proclamation first, if you'll bear with us.
Okay. And it's very short. Usually we pass this around, but I'm just going to go a couple paragraphs here. So, whereas public works professionals focus on infrastructure, facilities, emergency management, and services that are of vital importance to sustainable and resilient communities and the public health, high quality of life, and well-being of the people of the Village of Oregon, and whereas these infrastructures, facilities, and services could not be provided without the dedicated efforts of public works professionals who are federally mandated first responders, and the engineers, managers, and employees at all level of government and the private sector who are responsible for rebuilding, improving, and protecting our nation's transportation, water supply, water treatment, and solid waste systems, public buildings, and other structures and facilities essential for our citizens. And
whereas it is in the public interest for the citizens, civic leaders, and children in the Village of Oregon to gain knowledge and maintain ongoing interest and understanding of the importance of public work, first responders, and public works programs in their respective communities. And whereas the year 2023 marks the 63rd annual National Public Works Week sponsored by the American Public Works Association, now therefore I, Village President Phil Van Kampen, do hereby proclaim the week of May 21st through 27, 2023 as National Public Works Week. I urge all citizens to join with representatives of the American Public Works Association and government agencies in activities, events, and ceremonies designed to pay tribute to our public works professionals, engineers, managers, and employees, and to recognize the substantial contributions they make to protecting our national health, safety, and quality of life. And you guys want to comment? Or?
I'll just quickly comment, and emphasis on quickly, because I'm sure everybody's as hungry as I am and wants to go home. You'll notice that this is a retroactive proclamation. We are a couple weeks late on that, and for that we apologize. The reasons that we were late, as I mentioned in the memo, ironically or not so, really couldn't have gone the way that they did without our public works crews. So obviously the largest difference here in the room is that we are in a different building, and our public works crews were absolutely instrumental to making that happen seamlessly and cheerfully. We also have started construction on a major street construction project down on Janesville Street, moving on to State and Washington. And again, our public works crews have all been instrumentally involved in that. So obviously we have a contractor, but every time those barricades get moved, Nick Heck and his folks are in at 5 in the morning making that happen before rush hour so that it goes seamlessly. We've got Don Gray, our lead water operator, is out on site every day watching construction, making sure that that works well. We have people locating every day so that all of the many groups of people working out there aren't hitting utilities. So it really is a team effort, and our guys and women function in the background most of the time. And so I didn't want to miss this opportunity to recognize what they do. I'm not going to read through, of course, the entire list, but it is just one or two things that is unique and special about each and every employee that we have in the Public Works Department. So I thought it was really important to get that across. I do want to mention just before I go, as they mentioned, there are private sector engineers that ought to be recognized in this, as well as private sector contractors, and we are incredibly fortunate. Not only do we have our public people, but we have some really fantastic private engineers working on stuff. Town and Country is working tirelessly on Janesville Street. Rupert Milkey, who you've heard about several times, is instrumental in private development projects and in water system projects. And there are only a few of the ones that do this. So it's a big field with a lot of people that work really, really hard to just make things go well. And I thought it was important that they be acknowledged.
Yeah, and I can't speak any better than Lauren, but I think we should also mention Lauren herself and Jeff too, that lead the Public Work Department as well.
We don't do anything.
And I'm just going to mention every week is Public Works Week, so.
That's right.
Derek?
This is something that kind of hits near and dear to my heart, as I'm sure Jeff will understand. These are the employees that keep the water on in the middle of winter when the water main breaks. They clear the streets. They do a lot of the unsung stuff of the village, and they definitely deserve not only this recognition, but so much more.
Anyone else? Well, we'll give them a short round.
Yeah.
Thank you. Item 11B, upcoming meetings and events. That was in your packet.
Phil, can I lift one thing up for this? Just a reminder to everybody that the Public Art Fair is this Saturday.
Thank you.
Over by Triangle Park. I know the Ad Hoc Public Art Committee has been working tirelessly and are very excited to have that going on. So I appreciate all of their work.
Okay. Item 12. Derek and Amanda. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? We are adjourned. Thank you all very
We should
much.
probably all give a shout out to Martin, because we know he's watching, right?
Oh, yeah.
Hi, Martin.
Where do I look?
Check.